Dressed in a combat zone, lost my gear, still claimed the throne. I clicked the map, but it just said no. Now I'm dodging dragons with a garden hoe. I cast a spell, it fizzled out. My pet rock barked, then ran in doubt. Still top damage, don't ask how. Might be cursed, but I own it now. He's got no fear, he's got no frame. Missed the plot, but won the game. No walkthroughs, no guiding hand. Just one wild rodent and a reckless plan. Scratchman rising, hamster mode, and no strats, just loot and explosive code. He fights with snacks, sarcasm loaded. Every frame a glitch still goaded. Scratchman rising, stats on fire. Heals with laughs and mischief dire. Losing's cool, that is the trend. The Chaos King, you won't unfriend. Pressed attack, then hit the wall. Game crashed twice, still won it all. Rode a bug to the final boss. Sold my shoes, but took no loss. Crafted swords out of snack food lore. Equipped a hat from curse to car. Failed every quest with style and rage, but I still showed up on the victory page. This isn't luck, it's optimized chaos. I'm not broken, I just skip detection. Every glitch just feeds the fire. Every fail stacks higher and higher. No control, no calm, no grace. Just Scratchman charging, full Scratchman rising, storm of funk. Hamster speed with a bag of junk. Random drops, unfinished quests. Still somehow beats the rest. Scratchman rising, stats deceive. Level 1, but you believe. Glitched out profit, chaos made. Blows the horn and makes the no guide, no plan, no patch in hand. Just rage and crash, just crash, just crash. Okay, start stream. Play cool. Be funny, be cracked, don't suck. Say something clever. Wait! Why is the mic muted? You goddamn moron! Let's go! My brain body says tactical, my hands say oops. Drop my health pot, now I'm back in the soup. I prepped all week, forgot the quest, so I hit all F4 and call it finesse. My chat says focus, I say nah. I pull 3 mobs and aggroed God. Haven't blinked in 40 frames, but I'm still out here making gains. I am the stream, I am the glitch, gamer brain with a...
Hello, hello, hello. How are you guys doing today? Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. We're still kind of organizing a couple things. Let's see if this is a better. Yeah, it's a little bit better. How are you all doing today? Welcome, welcome, welcome in. Let's try this. That's hilarious. We're just gonna go here. I need to create a new scene for this, and I apologize in advance. I'm over here talking, and there's no audio. So I'm gonna go quickly recap what we were just talking about. I've been a DJ, professional DJ, for 19 years. I got into weddings in 2010, and it was about 2015 or 2016 that I realized that there's more to weddings. There should be more to weddings than just hitting play for 5 hours and sort of just basic, these just sort of throwaway announcements that it seems like happen all the time. So we're going to break the first episode down into about I think 4 or 5 parts. I've kind of got my little outline here of what I want to talk about. The first thing we're going to talk about is why timelines have a tendency to fall apart, or rather why they don't live up to some of the hype that they should live up to. Then we're going to talk about some timeline mistakes, right? And so on. We're going to talk about spotlight moments and how to sort of position them to have the maximum impact. We're going to talk about some dead time in the timeline that happens a lot if you're not careful. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some tips for the pros as well. This is geared for pros and for couples that want to learn more about how to control their timeline or take it to the next level. And for the pros, it's about how to polish your MC skills a little bit. And then we're going to go over an actual timeline, an actual timeline, one that is not so hot. And then we're going to compare that to one of mine. Not to say that I'm the be all end all or anything like that, but I definitely feel like I have something to offer to the general DJ/MC community after being able to do this for so long. And it's been a blessing. It's been a blast. Ask any of my couples and they'll tell you I have about 100 million stories of just the crazy things that have happened at weddings. Everything from fist fights that happened in front of the booth to, I had a bride once a few years ago. She tore her ACL on the final song of the evening, to just the most random, I think there was like an 85-year-old guy that ended up busting out the worm at one of the weddings, just out of nowhere stuff that you see. I've got 100 million stories. If you have a question, please ask. I'm here to answer questions. I'm here to give the benefit of the knowledge that I've learned. And I want to make sure that we can help kind of improve the wedding industry. Okay, so let's talk about why timelines typically fall apart. Well, the biggest issue with timelines is that, and this, you'll see this all the time, especially, and the pros will know this, the industry people that are here will understand this. You see this all the time. You'll see a question posted, especially in the DJ communities, is, what timeline should my couple have? Well, what do you mean, what timeline should your couple have? As if there's a one-size-fits-all timeline. The problem with us in the industry is that we get into a mode where we start to think that there's a default timeline. And it usually goes something along the lines of grand entrance, blessing, dinner, cake cutting, toast, first dance, father-daughter dance, mother-son dance, open dancing, and then end of night. And I've seen it ad nauseum. I've done it in the past ad nauseum. It's the same cookie cutter timeline. And as industry vets, we find this vibe, this flow that works for us. And we think that that's the way a wedding should be done. But the problem is that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all couple. Bob and Becky are not going to be the same as Steve and Stacy. They're not necessarily going to have the same priorities. They're not necessarily going to like the same music. They're not going to have the same humor level. One couple may be very, very religious. One couple may be agnostic or atheist. One couple may be very introverted. The other couple may be outgoing. You cannot apply the same timeline to every single couple. What you have to do is you have to ask the probing questions to get to know the couple. That is one of the secret sauces. You must get to know your couple on a personal level. Not just an interview and here's my packages, sign the contract, and then I'll talk to you a month before the wedding to make sure your forms are filled out. You must take the time to have planning meetings with your couples. You must take the time to get to know who they are as individuals. And the benefit is that they will get to know you as well. And through that process, you will build a bond of trust. So when you have a suggestion for them, or when you propose an idea to them, they're going to be much, much more receptive than just thinking that you're some hired random gun that is not important enough to listen to as far as advice is concerned. I have lived all of this. I have done all this. I did it for 5 or 6 years. And I couldn't figure out why nobody took me seriously when I would make suggestions to my couple, is because I was treating myself and my process like it was just throwaway, like I was just a cog to be plugged in. But anybody that knows anything about the wedding industry knows that the entertainment, if the couple chooses to have entertainment, the entertainment at a wedding reception is one of the most vital roles that they can have. And if you don't believe me, see what happens if the DJ doesn't show up. There ain't no party. It might be a gathering. There might be some formalities. Somebody might break out a Bluetooth speaker, but the party's dead. The party's going to die, right? The party is gone. And the purpose of a wedding reception, or what I like to tell my couples, is that a wedding reception is a very expensive themed party that they throw for their guests, and the bride and groom are the theme. This is their party, but they're throwing it for their guests because they want to celebrate their love with their guests, right? So when we talk about timelines, it's important to get to know the couple so that you can understand what kind of timeline they want. I have had couples that have wanted very, very formal timelines. I have had couples that have wanted very, very laid back timelines. I've had couples that wanted almost no formalities except maybe a first dance, no father-daughter dances, no cake cuttings, no grand entrance. There's not even a wedding party, right? And there are those weddings where I just kind of feel like an actual mobile jukebox, but it's because that's what they want. That's what they're asking for. And the goal is to get to know your couple so that even if your timeline looks like that stereotypical cookie cutter timeline, at least it will have been done intentionally, right? You're going to create those moments intentionally. Now, there's a venue here near where I live that the way that the venue itself is set up, the most efficient and smoothest flowing timeline is actually to go from the ceremony, right? From the ceremony, and actually have a cocktail hour, which is fine. It allows you, cocktail hour is important. It allows the guests to break the ice a little bit. It kind of allows the things to warm up. Obviously, alcohol can sometimes play a factor in that. It allows people to catch up a little bit and just kind of generally allows the energy in the room to warm. But in this particular situation, this venue that I'm referring to, you don't have dinner in the cocktail area. And there's a space for dinner, but there's only space for the dinner. There's literally not even space for a set of gear to go down there. Or rather, if you set up a set of gear down there, you'd blast everybody in the first half of the room to Kingdom Come. So what we do is we've done, and I do this pretty much every time I'm there, is we do a cocktail hour, and then I will verbally, not with a microphone, I'll just invite everyone downstairs to be seated for dinner. We'll have the bride and groom walk in and they'll be seated. No grand entrance, nothing fancy. They'll just come in and be seated. And then with my voice, without a microphone, downstairs, I will introduce myself just very briefly. I'll kind of give an overview as to how we're getting ready to dismiss tables. There are several different ways to dismiss tables. You do not have to go table 1, table 2, table 3. You don't have to do that. Any bozo can do that. But if that's what the couple wants, that's what the couple gets, right? So we go into dinner time. We get dinner time out of the way, and then everyone goes back upstairs. And then what we do is we literally knock out every single one of the formalities. Now, there's a lot of details here, because what happens is you have a big empty room where you don't have a lot of seating space because the tables are downstairs. So what we typically do is I try to create like a semicircle of chairs for those that might have no mobility issues or issues standing for a long time, and then everyone else can stand because we're just going to go bang right through all the different formalities. And we literally just go grand entrance into first dance, into the parents' dances, and so on. I generally don't like doing that. I don't like stacking it, but because of the way this venue is, it's That's just basically how it works, you know, and that's the most efficient flow. Now we could very, very easily go and do cocktail hour and then have everybody back up and do a grand entrance and then dismiss everybody downstairs and all that. But it's really difficult to get people to focus when they're in the middle of a cocktail hour. There's no chairs to stand and things like that. It's just odd. You want to create a sense of anticipation, I think, for the grand entrance. So this is like the only place that I have this particular timeline with. But there are some timelines where you're going to want to front load the reception, where you're going to want to go from your grand introduction to your first dance and maybe the cake cutting, a welcome speech, and then maybe into blessing and dinner if there's going to be a blessing and so on. It really all comes down to what is right for the couple. What are their preferences? Now, one of the big things that gets brought up from some of my couples, some of my brides and grooms, is that they want to make sure that their guests don't feel bored waiting for dinner. And that is on the master of ceremonies. Whether or not the guests are bored is totally on the master of ceremonies. If they're following a standard expected timeline, then the guests aren't seeing anything that's catching their attention and holding them and engaging them, especially not on an emotional level, right? So understanding that the master of ceremonies has the power to be able to engage and hold attention to where people aren't looking at their watches is a really powerful thing. And you can do that. You can do that. I have that question come up every other wedding or so with one of my couples, and I say it's not going to be a problem. And I've never, ever once had that be a problem unless there's some kind of outside thing that causes an actual delay with the reception, which can happen. You pros, if you've been around the block for a while, I've been on the block a couple times, you'll know what I'm talking about. So for the couples that are listening and the couples that will watch this eventually, I want you to understand what you think you are supposed to do for your wedding as far as timeline. You don't have to do at all. You can have a customized timeline. Now, it doesn't mean that you can just do something just like out of this world and things like that. I mean, I would love it one day if one of my couples, skydived into the reception. And there's a way to make that work. But for most couples, it's not very practical, right? Logistics do play a bit of a concern there. So the thing to understand about a timeline is that it's not a checklist of formalities that you go through because you're obligated to get through them. It is a flow of energy. Understanding that your timeline is a flow of energy and that you as the master of ceremonies are directly responsible for controlling that flow of energy. Once you start to understand that you can shape it and you can mold it, as long as you put things the right way, you set things up for success and so on, you're going to be just fine once you get that. There are timelines that look great on paper, but logistically just absolutely bomb because there's psychology that comes into play. We're not going to get into a lot of that right now because we're not going to go too deep dive. Keep in mind that guests are going to remember moments and not what order they happened in. They're going to remember the moments that occurred, not when they happened, right? Okay. So if you've ever been to a wedding, by the way, that's just feels like the timeline's dragged on, please let me know. Drop a yes in chat. Feel free to comment and so on. We're going to move on now to the main topic. 3 timeline mistakes. Bear with me just a second. I've got a person messaging me here, and I'm just going to respond back real quick. They're not a part of they're not really a part of the show today, so I have to talk to them after. Okay. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some mistakes that happen in weddings timelines, and kind of how to fix them, right? So the first thing is, I would say probably rushing the reception is like a major issue. A major issue is rushing the reception to where the guests don't feel like they can sort of, I don't know, emotionally decompress, if you will, right? if you're hitting a lot of emotional formalities, especially like a first dance and right into the parents' dances and so on, you need to be able to let those moments breathe. Now, I'm not saying that you should take a 5-minute break between each moment, but rushing the start of the reception is a big mistake. How you doing, Aureliana? Welcome in. Thank you so much. Please feel free to ask me any questions if you have them. If you start the grand introduction and you just basically become wham bam thank you ma'am and you start doing this, the guests are just not going to have a time to relax and to really allow themselves to sink themselves in emotionally to the moments that are occurring. We're talking to Facebook Live right now and Twitch. I think I'm also on Kick and probably on YouTube. We're doing the first episode of Reception Perception. So welcome in. We're talking wedding timelines and mistakes. And this is for couples and for pros that want to improve their MC skills and couples that want to understand that they can take their wedding to the next level and how to do that and some things to avoid. And we're talking about common timeline mistakes right now. So rushing things is not the best thing. And on the other side of that coin, allowing things to have this weird, awkward downtime, your master of ceremonies should have, yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. No, either one is fine. Right now I don't have any viewers on Facebook yet, so this is probably going to be a video that'll get viewed later on, hopefully. So taking too much time between the various formalities is a very, very bad thing to do if you want the guests to pay attention to those formalities. Guests have attention spans like freaking goldfish. The second they sense that it's uncertain as to what's happening next and they're not being engaged, the MC is not engaging them, you are going to lose their attention. They're going to get up, they're going to go to the bar, they're going to start having side conversations. And you're going to, no, I'm talking to anybody that'll listen. Hopefully somebody will eventually. Trust me, it's not a good thing for you as the MC, because when you roll into that first dance, everyone is so busy with their own side conversations, because apparently that's the reason they came and not the couple. Don't get me wrong. I will crash out about that. But at the same time, the MC has a responsibility to professionally engage and keep the guests' attention. If the guests are too busy yakking in the background because they think their conversation is the single most important thing happening at that moment and not what's going on with the couple, the MC has also failed. Now, I'm going to throw a caveat in here. There are crowds, there are certain kinds of crowds that you just will not be able to control. I have learned this the hard way, and I mean rough. I have had a few negative reviews in my life, believe it or not, and now most of the review is complete BS, but there are kernels of actual fact there. And the truth is that there are some crowds that cannot be controlled. The worst thing, from experience, the worst thing that you can do as the MC is to get mad and to criticize your guests or begin to basically antagonize the guest. Don't do that. The ability that you have as a master of ceremonies to have a group of people eating out of the palm of your hand is 100% dependent upon the bond that you have with the audience, the respect that they have for you, the respect that you have for them. You cannot talk to them like little children. I have learned this the hard way. Trust me, it will not go well for you. If you are a couple, make sure that your timeline doesn't have downtime in it. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't need to build in buffer time for certain things. Here's an example. If you have you basically have your cocktail, let's say your cocktail ends at 6 p.m., and you try to start your grand entrance at 6 p.m., it's not going to go right. You will almost guaranteed be delayed. Unless you have the single most well-behaved crowd in the world, at which point I would then say your dance time may be work for you to put in to get them to be motivated, because energy level has an effect. The crowds that I have a difficult time controlling, where you have lots of talking in the background, are also the most insane dance floors. The craziest energy, the most lit reactions to the songs. You can't play anything wrong. right? It's crazy. But the problem is there's a trade-off. That energy level is present throughout the formal time. So sometimes you just have to push through, right? Shout out to my big Catholic weddings. Big Catholic weddings, those happens all the time at those. I'm not saying that it can't be done. I'm just saying that it's difficult when you have a lot of energy and a lot of alcohol. It's one thing I love about Catholic weddings is because that water gets turned to wine real fast. So what you want to do though is you want to build in a proper buffer time. If cocktail hour ends at 6 o'clock, then what you want to do is you want to give it about 10 minutes. At 6 o'clock, the MC will ask the guests or invite the guests, they will invite the guests to be seated, ideally in person or going to little clusters in groups. Because once half to 3/4 of the crowd begin to move towards the tables, the rest of the crowd will begin to understand that it's time to go sit down. Now, hopefully, they'll get the idea that they need to be seated. If necessary, I will jump on the microphone and I will ask everyone to be seated. I try to avoid making as few mind-numbing announcements on a microphone as possible because I don't want the guests to get used to tuning me out. Right? Think about the guy at the airport that you don't hear this anymore, I don't think. The song can do a lot too. Absolutely, Aura. You're absolutely right. The song can have an effect, and we're actually going to talk about that in a second. But if you remember the guy at the airport that says the white zone is for loading and unloading only, that thing plays freaking constantly on a loop every 5 minutes. And what happens is after so much time at the airport, you tune it out. You don't even notice when it's gone off. Unless you're listening for it, you don't notice that it's actually happened. So as a pro tip for the MCs out there, try to avoid making as many BS announcements as possible. If the coordinator comes to you and says, "Hey, can you announce that it's time for everyone to be seated?" No problem, I'll take care of it. No, I'm not going to touch my microphone unless logistically I have to. I'm going to go to the guests and I'm going to invite them. Why? Because you get FaceTime with the guests. You can talk to them a little bit. You can ask them how they know the couple. You can build a bond. You can joke around. And most importantly, when you pick up the microphone, they understand who's speaking because they've already met you in person. You forged a bond with those individuals. They will give you typically the respect that you deserve as the master of ceremonies. Another way to think of that is the host of the event, the host with the most. You are hosting that event. You are the master of ceremonies. You are running the show. The coordinator is not running the show. And I apologize to any coordinators that might get a little butthurt about this, but they are not running the show. They are keeping things organized behind the scenes because nothing moves until the MC makes the announcement, hits the song, that sort of thing. Do not ever let it get twisted. You are the one running the show. And as the host, the person who's running the show, it is your responsibility, and it can be a heavy one, to make sure that all of the guests are in the know. They know what to do, where to go, where to be, what to expect, and all of those things. Okay, I'm getting off on tangents. I apologize. I have a tendency to do that. Let's talk about, we talked about front loading the reception and forgetting the buffer time, okay? Or we didn't talk about front loading the reception. Well, we did earlier, but anyway, I've got my list here. So clumping the spotlight moments together. Here's a reason why this may not be the right thing to do. Now, in that previous example with the venue, I gave you that's the way that we do them. But we also do them in such a way that the guests have a reason to pay attention. And I don't know that we're going to go into that psychology here yet for the MCs, but we're going to talk about that later on at some point because that's a vitally important part. If you stack all of your spotlight moments, if you've got toast, cake cutting, first dance, father-daughter dance, mother-son dance, those are usually the bare minimum formalities at a wedding. There might be a welcome speech. You may have a stepmother and groom dance. There's all kinds of unique things, right? But if you're stacking these more emotional and more sentimental items together all at once, what happens is your emotional dynamic stays stagnant. The line stays stagnant, okay? And it gets monotone. The emotional atmosphere becomes monotone. And people start to tune out. Okay. Now, that's not to say, like I said before, that you can't make that work. You can make it work. It's how you do what you do. It's not what we do. I tell my couples, we all do the same things. We do. We all do the same things. It's how we do what we do that makes the difference. So I recommend breaking them up. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll front load the cake cutting, especially because, and this is something that irritates me a lot of times, a lot of people assume that the cake cutting is a throwaway formality. It's a throwaway formality, that it's just not important. Well, if it's just not that important, then why are you doing it in the first place? Well, because it's tradition. Okay. So if it's tradition, you're just doing it because you think it's tradition, but you don't know what it means. If you don't know what it means, or you don't think it's important, then why are you doing it? And this is to my couples out here. This is what I want to impress upon you. If you don't have a good reason to do something, you probably shouldn't do it. Doing it for the sake of doing it is just dumb. It's just stupid, right? Don't go through it because you feel obligated. Do it because you have a reason to do it. Now, there are origins. There is symbolism to the cake cutting. It does mean something. But I hate it when they put the cake in the corner of the room, because what happens is, first of all, your photographer hates that because they have to cram into this tiny little window to try to get a couple of good shots, and we don't have their full creative ability to circle 360 around the camera and get just the perfect shot. My photographers out there know what I'm talking about, okay? Not to mention that you have the back of the couple facing the audience, right? This is where thinking of this as a theatrical production benefits the couples, because you should never have your back to the audience. They don't want to see your butt. They really don't. They want to see your face. They want to see the emotional reaction that you have to the moments that are being created, right? So the other bad thing about putting the cake in the corner is that half the room can't even see what's happening. And what happens is you've just lost the attention of half the room. They can't see. Why pay attention? What's the point, right? You could take a chance. You could take a chance on what? What do you mean, Aura? So what I typically recommend is front loading the cake cutting after grand entrance and doing it to where the cake is in the middle of the room, and then it can be moved out by the staff, the venue staff, or if you don't have venue staff, because some folks don't, then you have a couple of wedding party members or guests move the cake very carefully off to the side where it's out of the way of the dance floor or the center area. So don't think that has to be a throwaway. It doesn't. But what happens is if you are able to break that up and essentially go from your grand introduction into the cake cutting, maybe a welcome speech, dinner, and so on and so forth. And I'm really kind of the traditional way. Yeah, I mean, you could take a chance on the traditional way, or it's not so much. You can do a traditional timeline. You can do things in a traditional way, but it's also how you do those things. It's how you embrace those traditions. I have lots of couples that still have cake cuttings, but now they understand. I explained to them what the origin of the cake cutting is and why it's actually done at weddings and why it's important. So you could go with traditional, and that's fine, because there are some couples that want a very traditional, very formal wedding until the dance time, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. So being able to break up those moments allows you to create moments of emotional dynamic where something's funny and then something's sentimental and something's amusing or something's carefree. And what happens is you are varying the emotional dynamic that's being put into the room at any given moment. This is so important to the success of a wedding that is going to be engaging for the guest and is going to be memorable. Right? It's going to be memorable. I'm not going to go, like I said, that's a very, very important core feature that I preach to my couples, is creating emotional dynamic. And that goes for the ceremony too. We haven't even touched ceremonies, right? I'm going to do that this time. Okay. So those are some of the mistakes that I see on timelines. When it comes to those sorts of things, dead air, stacking the spotlight moments, having dinner too early, or basically not creating enough of a buffer between cocktail hour and dinner, or not having a cocktail hour at all, which I don't recommend, and so on. All right, so we're going to move on to the tip of the day: how to buy an extra 10 minutes without the guests noticing. Okay. Now, this is one that I hadn't originally thought up. This was actually suggested to me by a buddy of mine. How to buy an extra 10 minutes without the guests noticing. For the couples that are watching, I will preach this until I'm blue in the face. There is no such thing as a perfect wedding. It does not exist. It is a myth. It does not happen. It does not happen. There is a wedding that's perfect for you. There are going to be things that are going to go wrong at your wedding. Hopefully, if you've hired professional vendors, most of which you won't even know about, there will be things that go wrong that you don't even know about. Between your master of ceremonies, your coordinator, your photographer, those three, and if you have a venue coordinator, that kind of lump that in there, then at that point you shouldn't notice it. Only if it's a big deal. So let's just say, for instance, as a hypothetical, it comes to the end of time. We're getting ready to have the upswing the swing into the emotional formalities, and then open the dance floor for dance time later on. But the bride is going to go bustle. Anybody that knows anything about bustling a dress knows that it basically takes quantum mechanics to figure out how you're supposed to do it. In my humble opinion, left over right, and then right over left, and then the middle over the right, and then you divide by the square root of pi or some crap like that, right? Sometimes bustling does not cooperate, and sometimes it takes a little longer. I had a wedding in 2018 where it took 45 minutes to bustle the dress, and come to find out, the reason why we couldn't get it bustled is that there was a loop missing. One loop threw the whole thing off, right? And of course, it's a white loop on a white dress, so it's stupid difficult to find. So what happens in that situation where you're supposed to start, say, first dance at 7 o'clock, hypothetically, and the bride is still in there bustling, you need an extra 10 minutes. Not a problem. Not a problem. Very simply, on the microphone or that sort of thing, just let the guests know, hey, folks, you've got just a few minutes before we go into our toast or other formalities. Now would be a good time to go ahead and use the bathroom if you need to. If you need to refresh your drink, go ahead and run to the bar. We're going to start in about 10 minutes. You've just bought yourself 10 minutes without making it sound awkward, right? When it comes to like cocktail times, because there's a lot of leeway with cocktail times a lot of times, shout out to my photographers that go overtime and just forget that there's a timeline in place that the couple have set up. But you'll find fairly often that cocktail hours will never be right on time. They're not usually early, although that's happened. Most of them have a tendency to be about 5 to maybe 10 minutes late. That's not a problem. You don't have to do anything for that. As the MC, you don't need to do anything about that. Bride and groom, you don't have to worry. 10 minutes is going to kill your cocktail hour unless you've already gone way over time. I typically recommend an actual hour for cocktail hour. Hour 15 if your photographer's feeling really artsy-fartsy. But that's about the longest I recommend, because at that point, the guests are going to start looking at their watch. I have had weddings in the past where the cocktail has gone way too long and we've lost tables of guests. And that is lots of money down the drain for the couple. They've invested lots of money and flushed it down the drain because their photographer ran away with it or something else happened, things like that. So that's the basics. You can do that as long as you set the expectation. If you don't really make it sound like there's something wrong or things like that, the guests don't need to know that. All right. Because then they start to worry, and then the guests that feel like they want to help, then they go bug the bride, and it just becomes a whole thing. Okay. It's just one of those kinds of things that you run into. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to look at this timeline. And we're gonna do a bit of a study in timeline. I gotta switch my screen here. Bear with me for just a moment. I'm hoping. Here we go. Okay, I've actually got this prepared. So let's just see if I can switch it over. I think this is the right one. Maybe. I'll check my OBS here. Bear with me. That's not what we want. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so here's the timeline. The guests arrived at the wedding reception. They're immediately seated, and this is just a reception. This is not an example of a timeline that has a ceremony. I always thought it would be cool to have a gorilla destroy the end of the wedding. What do you think? Like an actual gorilla? or like one of those inflatable gorilla suits, because that's definitely an interesting suggestion. I mean, that would be memorable for sure. I don't know that it would be memorable in the right way. Um, I guess it really comes down to how you're planning on that. Big and dressed as one. Okay. But why the gorilla though? So the question would be, why the gorilla? Why not a buffalo? Why not a saber-toothed tiger? Like, the question is why, right? We're always going to ask the question why. Why is it a gorilla? Now, if the bride works at a zoo and she has a favorite, because everyone is scared of gorillas, which is great, because then we'll scare the heck out of everybody, and all that. I'll be really honest with you. That may not go over super well. There's a lot of things at a wedding that the bride and groom don't want to have destroyed. A lot of times they'll try to resell their decorations and things like that. Now, if you created a spot, an area that had like cardboard boxes wrapped up as wedding gifts or something like that, and so on and so forth, maybe that would work. But if you would have to do something like that really, really the right way, because it only takes one guest to play the hero and go beat somebody up in a gorilla suit, right? I mean, you got to think that they think they're sticking up for the couple, and some random prankster has just crashed the wedding and trying to destroy the stuff at the wedding. You're going to get tackled. That person's going to get tackled, and they're probably going to get hurt. So unless you, no way. Okay. Unless you set that up right, you have to set it up really right if you're going to create a moment like that. Well, I don't believe that they would actually believe it's a gorilla. I mean, I think most people are able to tell the difference between a real gorilla and somebody in a gorilla suit. What they're thinking is that this is a prankster that's come to crash the wedding for, Facebook likes, or excuse me, TikTok likes or clout or something like that. And then, essentially feel like you could pull up gorilla suit. I mean, if it looks realistic, who knows? It's hard to say. But at the same time, horrifying your guests and scaring them is a negative emotion. You really have to be careful about how you control the emotions. At a wedding, it may not go super well, but there's probably a way to set it up right. I like to tell my couples, I like to tell them, I won't really tell you no typically. I'll tell you, here's how we can make this work. Okay. So let's go over this timeline. So 5 o'clock, the guests arrive at the reception. No cocktail hour. They're immediately seated. 5:05, the bridal party grand entrance. Well, first of all, we're going to talk about that in a second. Then at 5:10, the dinner service begins. 6:30, you've got toasts. Okay. And then you've got cake cutting at 6:45. 6:50, you've got the first dance. 6:55, the parent dances. 7 o'clock, open dancing. 9:45, bouquet and garter toss. And then 10 o'clock, grand entrance. Okay. Lots of problems with this. I didn't actually read through this whole timeline. I pulled up an example bad timeline, kind of copied and pasted. There's lots of problems with this. First of all, guests don't all arrive at the same time. That's just human nature. Some people are going to be like, this always happens. There's the family that just decides to show up an hour and a half before the wedding ceremony. Vendors are still setting up. The bride's not even in her dress yet. Or if she is, they're out taking photos, and the bride doesn't want anyone seeing her before she makes her way down the aisle. But yet here comes this company ruining the surprise for the bride. And all that. I've had weddings like that where the bride's been 2 hours late. I think I had it one about 4 or 5 years ago, and it was not good. But the guests are not all going to arrive at the same time. Some of them are going to be early, and there are going to be those late brides. Pro tip to the couples, by the way: tell your guests that your wedding starts at 4:15 and then started at 4:30. Why? Because they'll typically show up to be there by 4:15, and the late ones will be 5 or 10 minutes late, so that by the time you get into the actual ceremony, most of the people that are going to be there are already there, and you have a much fewer amount of stragglers. Okay. So
That's the first thing. The guests are not all going to arrive at the same time. And then they're immediately seated and expecting to start the grand entrance at 5 o'clock. You're 5:05. You've had no cocktail hour. The guests haven't had a drink. They haven't been refreshed. They haven't had a chance to catch up or anything like that. You know what? Actually, there's a whole list down here. There's no breathing room for the guests. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. The guests arrive. They're immediately seated. No cocktail hour. No mingling space. You have no energy built. You can always build anticipation for the grand introduction, but usually that anticipation for the grand introduction is built when I apologize for my background right now, folks. I thought I had locked my door. So the grand introduction, the energy is built in the grand introduction, usually right when you're going into that. That's part of the MC's responsibility. So it says the grand entrance happens right away before the guests have had time to settle, get a drink, and build excitement, kind of what we're talking about right now. Dinner drag. We're starting the dinner at 5:10. First of all, that is awful early for a dinner. Awful early for a dinner. Now, I do typically try to recommend to my couples Saturday weddings, because Saturday weddings allow people to not have to worry about getting off work or having to worry about going to work the next day. You have a good mix where people can stay, enjoy themselves. They don't feel super rushed and things like that. So yeah, I'm probably going to do some later. I'm just not sure. I got to touch base with the kiddo because I think he wants to watch Star Wars tonight. At any rate, so we're starting the dinner at 5:10. That means people are going to eat too early, and it's going to create a lull before dancing, and so on. It says by the time the music starts, everyone food coma and restless. And that can be handled by the MC. There are ways to get around that. But dinner at 5:10 is too early. Awkward toast timing. Toast after dinner services says the guests are already tested out. Well, that's not true at all. I disagree with that. The guests will feel how you make them want to feel about the moment. If your energy is down, their energy is going to down. They're going to reflect that back at you. They're not going to treat that moment with importance unless you hype it up or you create a sense of importance for them. But one thing that I am really big on, and this is a big annoyance, and I understand they're just trying to do their job, but when you have important moments like toasts, first dance, and parents' dances, and you have all the servers coming in and grabbing plates and clattering silverware, grabbing dishes, and they're walking in between the guests, breaking their line of sight, what's happening is you're taking those guests out of the moment and removing them from that emotion. And then the guests start to talk, they lose the tension, you lose the guest's attention, and the couple's moments that they've waited literally at least a year in most cases or longer, planning and all that, it just falls flat. It doesn't deliver. Okay. We talked about the stacked spotlight moments. Guests get moment fatigue. I've never heard of it like that, but that's exactly what it is. Moment fatigue. You have to vary it up. There's a reason why haunted houses are designed to scare the bejesus out of you, is because it's not somebody stepping out in the hallway or whatever out of the closet every 5 seconds. Otherwise, it wouldn't be scary because you just expect it constantly, right? Opening the dance floor at 7 and going for 3 hours. I've always told my couples the least amount of time that you want to have for dancing is 90 minutes. The most you typically want to have is 2.5 hours. Now, I've had dance floors go for 4 hours. I had a wedding not too long ago where they had a 2-hour dance time and an 1.5 hour long after party where they just raged. They wore me out. And I typically wear them out. The sweet spot is right about 2 to 2.5 hours. You should be able to get in all the bangers you need and provide enough dance floor musical dynamic on the dance floor to create a really robust dance time. And I tell my couples there are 4 main types of songs that I typically recommend get mixed throughout dance time. Your straight bangers, your party songs, your dance songs, your slow jams. Let the couples get out there and dance with their sweetheart and that sort of thing. Give a breather for the ones that don't want to do a slow jam. It lets them take a breather, right? You've got your line dances, your Cupid shuffles, your cha-cha slides, your wobbles, things like that. Get Low is an absolute banger, exactly right. And then you have your sing-alongs. You've got your sing-alongs. Don't Stop Believin' and Living on a Prayers and the songs that Mr. Brightside, that everybody loves singing at the top of their lungs. If you mix these different types of music in your dance time, you will create enough dynamic. And here's the thing. You're not going to hit for everybody. Now, you might have weddings where it seems like 99% of the people are on the dance floor. Living on a Prayer, absolute classic. Absolute. you might have 99% people on the dance floor. There are always going to be those people that are just not going to dance. They're either too introverted, they're too scared, too self-conscious, whatever it happens to be. They're just not going to dance. We're not worried about them. They're not going to dance anyway. I'm not worried about playing what they're going to like, unless it'll listen to get them to dance. The other thing is for MCs, for DJs, you need to learn how to cycle your dance floor. There are times, especially as I go into like the last 30 minutes or so of the night, where I intentionally kill the dance floor a little bit. Not a lot. I play something that's like a mid-tier banger, right? Something that not everybody's going to dance with. And the ones that are looking for an excuse to get a drink, go to the bathroom, take a breather and all that, they'll cycle off the dance floor and get a little bit of energy and recharge. Because what's going to happen is for the last 30 minutes, I'm going hard at it. I'm going to hit them with the really good stuff, the top shelf bangers. And I'm going to keep their asses on the dance floor until the end of the night to create this massive finale, right? Understanding how dance floor psychology works is really, really important. Being able to read the dance floor and know your demographics and understand what you're going to want to hear without having to have input from your couple, although that can help and that's important as well. But a good professional DJ should not have to rely on a playlist. There are plenty of times where I have been given no requests and I just go with what I think the room is going to want. And 99% of the time it works. Not always. You can't win them all. But once you get too long, past 2 hours and 30 minutes, the crowd starts to get worn out. And that's when you get to see people leaving in mass. They leave and make this mass exodus. And then what happens is at the end of the night, when you get ready for the finale or the send-off, you've got like 3 people left with waving a sparkler and not this grand send-off like the couple wanted. So I always tell my couples how we end is more important than when we end. If I notice that the guests are starting to take off, if maybe it's just the crowd that's got a lot of squares, and maybe they're just not big dancers, and maybe they're just an early crowd, right? I will tell my couples that I'll come to you and let you know, here's what I'm seeing. Do you want to bump the end of the night up? Chances are they're probably going to want to anyway, because by then the bride and groom are absolute zombies. They are dead on their feet. They have been up and going for so long. Not to mention the emotional toll that a day like that actually takes on you. You're exhausted in physically, mentally, spiritually, and so on, right? So your MC should be your hype men and hype women. Now, there are exceptions to that. You do like a bar mitzvah. You can definitely employ like dancers and stuff, but your MC should be your hype man. And then the bouquet toss. Waiting till 9:45 to do a bouquet and garter toss, if you choose to do one, is just dumb, because everybody's pretty much left. They're gone. They've left. Half the people that would have participated are gone. You don't need actors, or if your MC is a professional, you won't need an actor. You'll need one person who knows how to reciprocate energy or reflect that energy back. You shouldn't need that. So the reason why this is bad is just because it just doesn't control the energy very well at all. So I'm going to pull up now an example timeline here from one of my weddings. Here it is. That's not you. You go away. That's admin stuff. Here we go. And we're going to talk about what we did here. This was last November. So not quite a year ago, but getting there. So what happens is I got there and we went into our cocktail hour. At 6:50, I made the announcement and invited the guests into the reception hall. Actually, it wasn't an announcement. I invited them personally because there were like 300 people. It was a massive crowd. And I already knew that this was absolutely going to be insanely lit. What we did is we introduced the grandparents at their table because we wanted them to be acknowledged, but the grandparents sometimes can have mobility issues. And so they were not able to participate in the grand introduction, if memory serves. Then we actually went into the grand introduction. The grand introduction that we did in this particular case is called a zepha. A zepha is a Middle Eastern style grand entrance that is basically the equivalent of Prince Ali coming into Agrabah in Aladdin. And what happens is we had, the parents, both sets of parents. We had the ushers, We had the bridesmaids, we had the groomsmen. You can also get the ring bearers and flower girls if they're old enough and they're able to participate. And what the goal is there is you give everybody gets a light up LED thing, a noise maker, something that's just like super hype. And the music that you're going to play is you're going to play something that's super hype. If you notice here, we went from Bring 'Em Out into I Got a Feeling into Grove Street Party. Right, so we had three kind of like a mashup of songs, ending on Grove Street Party by Waka Flocka, and what happened is as the guests, or excuse me, as the people came in for the grand entrance, they grabbed guests at the tables and brought them onto the dance floor. I had already set this moment up was for success with about half the crowd by letting them know that there was going to be an audience participation portion of the grand introduction, so they knew to expect it. And the rest of it, you can rely on the the crowd mentality, because the rest of the people started to follow. Most of the rest of the people. That grand entrance was one of the most lit grand entrances I've ever done. I was so nervous. It was the first time I'd ever done that outside of the Egyptian American wedding I did a couple years prior, which is where I got the idea. Now it's in my regular rotation of things to recommend for couples. We went into the cake cutting, which was center, and then it was moved. We did something that I do called the love story presentation, which is something that if you haven't received, for the MCs out there, look at me. If you haven't received professional training, and there's one person that I recommend, and you can ask me and message me, but if you haven't received professional training to present a love story properly, you should not be doing it. You are doing it a disservice. I will die on that hill. I will die on that hill. No, for the MCs that might be watching, I will die on that hill. Come at me. We went into their first dance. We had a welcome speech from the bride and groom. We did something called the icebreaker, which is really, really fun. We had a blessing from the bride's dad. Then we went into a plated dinner. No need to dismiss. No, that was for MCs. No need to dismiss tables here. And then that was at 7:40. At 8:10, because the bride wanted to move forward a little bit earlier in the dinner time, we basically wanted to allow people to have their dinner served, but we didn't want them also talking, and we wanted to save some time. And I said, well, that's great. If we do it while the guests are still eating, but the dinner has actually been served, they'll have their mouths full and they won't be able to talk to each other during toast. So that kind of helps the toast work, and it worked very, very well. So we had the father of the bride, we had the best man, and the sister and maid of honor. And then we went into a father-daughter dance. We went into a mother-son dance. And then we had a surprise mother-daughter dance. And the bride recorded a surprise message to her mom talking about how much she loved her and what this moment means. And we played that. The dance itself was also a surprise. Her mom did not know that. So she was already very emotional finding out that her daughter wanted to have that moment. This is a big deal. This is an honor that she's been given to have a dance with her daughter. So it was a very emotional impact. Then we went into like the spotlight or anniversary dance. We dedicated this to Jim and Denise. Their anniversary was October 17th of 1987. And we actually gave them the first part of the spotlight dance and then had everyone else join them and then rolled into the anniversary dance. And then we went into something called a memorial dance. This does not happen very often, but it is a very emotional sort of thing. We played See You Again from Wiz Khalifa, and this was in memory of Ryan. And so we asked all of Ryan's friends to the dance floor. And then what we did is we transitioned into a much more upbeat, fun song that he really liked, called Swag Surfin' by Lil Wayne. And then we dedicated the dance time as we opened the dance floor for everyone and asked them to join the others on the dance floor. We dedicated that dance time to Ryan. The dance time was nuts, absolutely just stupid crazy. I remember that they were doing the one more song chant at the end, but most venues have hard stop rules on time. And some of them don't. So you can always ask your venue if you can go overtime if you're having that good of a time. Then we went into our last dance, which was Mr. Brightside by the Killers, which is a great, great way. That was 15 minutes before the end of the night. That was at 11:45. At 11:50, we sent the guests outside for a send-off. Once they were gone, 5 minutes later at 11:55, we went into the final private dance, just the bride and groom, the photographer, the videographer, and myself. And then once I start the song, I get out and I organized everyone for the send-off, and then we had their send-off in the end of night. That wedding, I have heard so many compliments about, even through channels that were not expected, that you would not expect to find when it comes to a wedding. And so it's just one of those things where you have to be able to understand the flow of energy and how it works, and understand that you don't have to do the same cookie cutter timeline over and over and over again in order to have a successful wedding. Okay, I'm going to switch my screen back here to hopefully get the last bit of what we want to talk about out of the way. I think we're just about there. It's 9 o'clock, so it's kind of time to end the episode. But I first of all, I want to say thank you guys for really being here. It means a lot to me to have you guys watch this, even those of you not watching it live. Please, your questions and comments and things like that, you're welcome. If you disagree with me, you're welcome to disagree with me too. You know, I'm not the only MC in the world, and the most important thing is that if you're an MC, that you don't try to do a wedding the same way you think it's supposed to be done. You do a wedding genuinely how you would do it. You be yourself. Don't try to be another DJ. Don't try to be another individual. Try to be yourself and put yourself out there. When you're genuine and you can allow yourself to come through, 9 times out of 10, you will connect with the audience so much better. So much better. Okay, so if you like this, follow me on Twitch. Please, Scratchman the Hamster is the name. Scratchman the Hamster. It's THA, not THE. You can find me on Twitch. Next week's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about how not to be cheesy on the microphone for the professionals. And for the couples, we're going to talk about how not to set up cheesy moments. That's right. We're going to talk about how to do things your way, not your sister or your friends or your brother's way. We're going to talk about ways to have your wedding reception and give you some ideas of things that you can consider. Hope you guys had a great time. Thank you guys so much for watching. It really does mean the world. Thank you guys for being here. And we're going to go ahead and end the stream now. And I'll share this video live in some of the DJ groups and wedding groups on Facebook. Thank you guys for being here.